Hi, Nerd Reactor. I'm inviting you to see my new film, Reminiscence, when it comes to theaters and HBO Max on August 20th.
Nerd Reactor, roll out.
Hey John, how you doing?
Doing good. And how about you, Daniel?
Good, good. Nice to meet you.
So yeah, you're in Reminiscence. You're playing a character that has a very interesting past and a very different demeanor. And it's the background for that. I don't know what you did to prepare for a role like this.
It was very interesting. Like Lisa Joy and I kind of collaborated together on making this. And when you collaborate with someone who's also Asian American and creating this character, you can put a lot more, or you do end up putting a lot more into the character than what's written on the page. But first of all, things that were already there were like this fact that he speaks English and Chinese together, mixed together. Those are things that Lisa had already created with this character on the page. But things like the Southern accent and all that kind of stuff, like I added those things on as we developed the character. Because Lisa wanted to make this character a really memorable character, a character that we've not seen an Asian American play before, stuff like that. And, there's some stuff that's stereotypical about him that is like, he's a gangster, he's a bad guy, we've seen that before with Asian American characters, but she wanted to make him very three-dimensional in a fresh way. And so that was our goal. We just kept adding and adding and adding to the character until we got to a point where we felt like this guy was cool, pretty cool to see on screen.
Oh yeah. And I think for me, he's definitely one of my favorite parts of the film, just with the portrayal, your portrayal as him,
right,
the
right.
history behind the character, because
Right.
there's like a lot of stuff that is like, oh, I want to know more. And
yeah, there's a lot. I mean, that you would feel that, a white person wouldn't feel like when he says, people like you were drafted, but people like me were put into camps, were interned, right? And like that makes you think about, Japanese Americans being interned, 200,000 of them, and then the justices they went through. And so this character also probably went through crap like that as well, right? And so he's got this chip on his shoulder and he's angry about this shit, but he's also a survivalist, right? So he's going to survive, and that's how he's become who he is, this kind of gangster selling this Bacca, which is also interesting, this drug that he's selling for people to escape, which is actually very similar to what Hugh's character is doing. He's selling time in this machine for people to live in their past memories, escaping from the present also, because the present is almost too terrible to have to deal with,
Yeah. And speaking of Bacca, it's it's in the movie. It's like it's an important thing.
Yeah.
And what was the meaning behind that? Do you know of the word? Like, because when I think of that, I think of the Japanese
Japanese words mean stupid, right?
Yeah.
Foolish. I'm not actually sure. I asked Lisa about it because I told her that too. I go, did you know Bacca means, kind of foolish and dumb in Japanese? She's like, oh, that's kind of perfect for a name and for it. Yeah, and the fact that they look like little boba pearls, that's a funny thing as well. But I think we looked at it as this thing. It's again, the present is too terrible. Like the global warming has happened. It's so hot that you can only be out at night. There's this massive poverty gap, and the poor are really poor and the rich are really rich. So this Bacca exists because people they just want to escape. They want to get out of the environment they're in right now. And I think that's why a lot of people do drugs, is because they want to get out of the present shitty situation they're in and be in some other place. And so he's successful because a lot of people don't want to be in the present. So he sells a lot of Bacca.
Yeah. And your character is set in New Orleans. I don't know how you pronounce you yourself, like New Orleans or New Orleans.
Yeah.
New Orleans, yeah.
Yeah.
And the set, what was that like? Like, I don't know if it was like recreated with just this huge thing with maybe like the wall in the background, water is trying to seep in with the the flooding.
Yeah, it's interesting because we didn't have to do too much green screen. The way the technology that they used didn't have to put the green screens up. So when we're filming, it just felt like we were filming on the streets of New Orleans. But we knew from the script that this world was going to be vastly different than the world that we know now, right? And so all these enhancements were done afterwards. That's why it's so great to watch the movie after making it, because you didn't know how it was going to visually turn out. She painted a very visual picture in the script, but you didn't know how it was going to turn out in the end. And it worked really nice. I mean, it's really beautiful to see these flooded New Orleans and Miami streets, and this kind of warning about the future if we don't, take heed to global warming.
Yeah. And I'll go back to like your character, with Lisa Joy working on this, making it different. So it's very because you have a huge list of work you've done before with like martial arts stuff, and I think with this one, you're just like a drug kingpin, so it's definitely different. And how do you feel about that? Like, how excited were you, like, tackling this role?
Yeah, I was really excited. Honestly speaking, I had taken like 8 or 9 months off of work after doing Badlands season 3 because it's very easy as a person of color when you do something like Badlands to be stereotyped, right?
Mhm.
And so I was stereotyped as this martial arts guy. All I was being offered was martial arts stuff. When in fact, in my career of over 60 something movies, I've only done 2 or 3 martial arts things, right? And
Mhm.
so I was waiting for the next project to come along that wasn't that and that was interesting and that was, innovative for an Asian American character. Because I realized my career is very different here than it was in Asia. In Asia, I'm just playing characters, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's Asian, we're playing characters, right? It doesn't matter. Whereas here, I had to actually think about what kind of impact that character has on us as Asian Americans, right?
Yeah.
A whole different responsibility, right? And so, I felt it was in my responsibility for my career and for others to not fall into a stereotype and be stuck there, right?
Mhm.
To be playing other types of characters and be also show my breadth as an actor. And so when this came along, I was so stoked because it was perfectly the character that I was kind of searching for that I didn't know about. And then the fact that Lisa Joy is also Asian American and that she was looking out for me and looking out for this character was an added bonus.
Yeah. And when you talk about like, doing stuff for like Hong Kong films and then this, like switching to that mentality, I don't know how difficult that is for you, or it's kind of like a case by case basis.
No, it's difficult. Like when I first came back, I wasn't ready for that. I didn't think
Yeah.
about it. When I was doing Into the Badlands, I was like, I play a lead role in Hong Kong. I play a lead role here. And I'd be walking around set and people like, oh, number one, like it's a big deal for a Chinese guy to be the number one on the call sheet, to be the lead of a show. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand what's happening. And now I realize like it might be considered microaggressions, right? But like people are just not used to seeing an Asian male leading a show or leading a movie, right? And so
Mhm.
that was interesting to kind of wake up to that. And then when I was doing press for it, like all the Asian American press were like trying to put me on this pedestal of being, oh, you're the only Asian American actor, male actor leading a TV show right now, right? I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't think about it that way. And so I kind of didn't really get used to that right away. But then I slowly started to understand the importance because being away for 20 years, that muscle just went to sleep in my brain, right? To have to think of things in that way, in terms of race all the time, right? And then to come back here and to have to think that way, that muscle, well, in the past year has gotten really strong because of all the stuff we'd had to deal with all the South Asian hate stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it took time for me to get used to that and understand the importance of that responsibility.
With going back to Reminiscence, the
Mhm.
characters that you're dealing with, you're acting opposite Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson.
Mhm.
And so what was that like working with them? Did you have any preconceived notion before? Or it's like Hugh Jackman, Wolverine? Yes.
Yeah, no, that was cool. It was Wolverine versus Sunny, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really have any preconceived ideas. I was just, hoping this would be a fun group to work with, and they
Yeah.
really were. Like Hugh, and people say this all the time about him, but it's really true. He's just a really nice guy. Like he's so good at what he does. You think that there would be some, most people that are very, very good at what they do, there's something quirky or weird or diva-ish about them. But he has none of that. He's so normal. And he's just like a regular dude that likes to hang out and loves being on set and loves doing the work. And then Rebecca was awesome because she brings this like whole level of intensity. I don't know what it is about her. Maybe it's her eyes or something, but very intense. And like, that scene where I see her for the first time in that bar singing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really have to act in that scene because she's just bringing it, right? She's bringing this really seductive allure. And it made it really easy for me to work with her.
For this movie sci-fi, and you've done the Badlands is also like the future.
Yeah.
Is this like your favorite type of genre, or you're the type of actors like I'm down to do whatever it is as long as it's is good for me as an actor?
I just love working in genre and then trying to elevate it, right? And that's what I think what Lisa's done. They're really good at that. Like that's what Westworld is sci-fi and elevating it to this whole other, intellectual meditation on AI and what that means, right? And then this one, again, the same thing. It's like seems like the simple film noir sci-fi movie, but there's so many other layers to it other than that, right? And so that's what makes it really interesting, successful, and fresh as well, because it's not something you've seen before. It's like you recognize certain elements, but then she's mashed them up in a way that you've never really experienced that before in a film. And so it's a real testament to Lisa's ability as a writer and director.